those companies that go away, that fade away, in the interest of staying
relevant,
fade away because they've abandoned the core values.
They distanced themselves
from
the very essence.
Disney has agreed to acquire Marvel,
acquiring Lucasfilm.
Creativity for 50 years
Passion
now.
of a great creator.
Creation is creativity.
Marvel,
not a science.
creativity remain relevant.
Great creativity is almost a miracle.
Passion,
It's just a love
vision,
of
creativity.
I tell it to people all the time.
So there is a small topic I always wanted to talk about but never fully decided on, because this video is going to be not so typical in terms of quality, but I just thought, you know what, why not? So I'm going to talk about this not so shortly and not so delicately, and that is Bob Iger, Disney, and Bob Iger's Disney. I think it's safe to say that Disney is currently in shambles. It's kind of crazy how this bombastic company, after facing triumphs after triumphs for a couple of consecutive years, just sank so suddenly in every way imaginable, including financially. Finally. But truthfully, there's nothing about anything that is going on in Hollywood, but especially with Disney, sudden or unexpected. It's actually the most predictable thing ever. There was no catastrophic event. Just an ambiguous 6'1" entity that very slowly but undeniably dug the hole for itself. I would say for me, it was the year 2019, right after episode 9 and Endgame, when I was like, okay, so what's next truly? What is the next billion-dollar project? Avatar, Spider-Man, how many live-action remakes have we left to bank on until we run out? And, actually need to start creating stuff. And we did run out, but we did not start creating stuff, obviously. Of course, back then there were still a lot of prospects for Disney, but a lot of them needed a refreshment in form of a new chapter, a new phase, a new being the keyword here. And for some reason I could not explain at the time, I was very skeptical that they would manage it correctly. And obviously, then the lockdown hit and it became really obvious really fast that it was all downhill from here. And they, in fact, were completely incapable of starting a new chapter for any of their IPs. Bob Iger is a businessman first and foremost, and obviously I know nothing about business, and frankly I don't do numbers, so I cannot explain or articulate this from a point of view of a money-hungry capitalist billionaire, but I will say it from a point of view of a person who grew up with Bob Iger's Disney and experienced all highs and lows of its reign. But before we continue, I just wanted to drop in here and say a quick message, a quick announcement. I launched a Patreon, a very textbook YouTuber style. I'm really excited about it because it's another way to connect with you guys. I will be much more personal on there. There's already a 47-minute long commentary on The Last Jedi, and I will be doing more because it was so much fun. It was so much fun to make. To say that algorithm has been not so kind would be an underestimation over the last few months. So it would really help me out and I would really appreciate it, truly. So yeah. Oh, and it's also important to mention that I won't touch upon any Disneyland or film unrelated stuff because there is just more than 3,000 kilometers between me and the nearest Disneyland, so I could not care less about kids or parks, sorry. The only and the most important thing you need to know about this man right here is that from the day he stepped in as a CEO in 2005, Bob Iger had a single strategy. One, the plan he has been sticking to, and the one he has not altered since. This plan was very simple, but very expensive, ambitious, effective, and frankly very goddamn successful. For a time. The plan was as simple as buy the competition, milk the competition, move on to another competition. We're talking major studios here, Pixar, Marvel, and Lucasfilm. All of which might as well be lying at the bottom of the ocean right now. But let's talk chronology for a moment. I'm crossing my fingers that I pronounced that right. So, Iger starts his career as a CEO with a bang by buying Pixar in 2006. In 2009, Disney buys Marvel, which was not as big of a deal at the time as you would have expected, even though it did cost them $4 billion. 2010 marks the release of Alice in Wonderland, even though I think the true live-action remake era became a real deal in 2015 with Cinderella. That was when Disney started to get real greedy with these. 2012, Disney buys Star Wars. Fuck. Only 3 years later, in 2015, Disney has not only brainstormed or planned, but premiered one of the most ambitious Star Wars projects ever, The Force Awakens. Pixar has done Not much in 2010s, which should have been some type of a red flag at the time, but I guess at least we have Elemento now. During that time, Marvel is doing its thing and very unexpectedly for everyone involved, growing a humongous audience and hype without even using Spider-Man's help. By 2018, Disney is flabbergasted by the unexpected terrible reception of the sequel trilogy, and completely caught off guard by the fact that Marvel basically overshadowed every single drop of the hype that Disney predicted for Star Wars back in 2012 and 2019. The peak of Disney. Billions and billions all around, unsinkable prospect of a company. Or is it? They also launched Disney Plus. Oh, and also they bought 20th Century Fox. And that's unimportant because Bobby is too scared of Jimmy to do anything notable about blue people yet, so. Oh, and finally, 2023, we have basically low quality filmmaking all around. Bunch of Marvel films that flopped, Pixar film that flopped, Disney live-action remake that flopped, Lucasfilm film that flopped. Oh, Bobby, what a mastermind you are. Bobby Booby Iger is widely regarded as a mastermind who took Disney from a very successful company to basically the most powerful entity in entertainment business. But from today's perspective, it truly seems to me that at the cost of this financial renaissance, we got a creative bankruptcy, which ironically will conclude in a huge financial crush. So, In 2015, yes, Iger absolutely would be regarded as a total mastermind. Every one of his major decisions seemed promising and very successful, and one of the best in Disney's history. But in 2023, where Pixar, Lucasfilm, and Marvel projects are flopping one after the other, a person who was thought to take Michael Eisner's failed legacy and revolutionize it ended up being just like his quote-unquote failed predecessor, desperately trying to bank on half-assed sequels. What gives us the context of how Bobby Boy functions as a CEO is the differences between his handling of Lucasfilm and Marvel. Star Wars isn't everything, right? Robert was also responsible for one of the most exciting and well-executed and built-up franchises in the history of filmmaking, right? Infinity Saga and Avengers will probably forever remain as one of the most celebrated, redeeming points of Bob Iger's legacy. Marvel's unexpected and well-deserved success during 2010s was the biggest enigma and inconsistency in my trial of evaluating Bob Iger's legacy. The effort, passion, and dedication put into the Infinity Saga was completely inconsistent with the ever-declining quality of any other of their IPs. The dreaded Star Wars sequel trilogy, the Pirates of the Caribbean, soulless live-action remakes, Pixar's sudden motive to pump out half-assed sequels left and right, Disney's own animation studio being almost completely neglected. And then there was Marvel. How? Yeah, that was a question that bothered me for a long time. Until, and imagine my fucking disappointment at the stupid simplicity, I realized the answer. Infinity Saga did not happen because of Robert. It happened in spite of Robert. The key difference here is two things. Kevin Feige himself and, Bob Iger's underestimation of Marvel. Differently from Lucasfilm, when Disney bought Marvel, the studio did not have to be remade. Just like Pixar, initially Marvel kept a lot of its crucial assets, including Kevin Feige, who even before Disney already had a plan for what was going to end up to be Infinity Saga. Because Pixar and Marvel were active working studios right before transitioning, Disney seemed to be very hands-off and let them do their thing for a while. How cute. So the studio seemed to keep the semblance of creative autonomy instead of being just soulless puppets in hands of a mouse, just like Lucasfilm was right away. Because again, Lucasfilm was just an empty vessel by the time Disney got to it, and once it did, while Bob Iger's greediness, lack of creativity, and ability to manage art shined through this blindingly for the first time. I do think that Bob Iger underestimated Marvel as a property. I'm not saying that he didn't have plans or hopes for it, but my guess is that initially, his decision to even buy the studio was highly motivated by the obvious financial potential of things like Fantastic Four, and not all by Kevin Feige's nerdy plan about some Thanos and his golden glove. But as Feige's projects kept proving themselves to be quite successful, Bobby let the guy play with his action figures a little longer, just like he did with Pixar initially. But that was until Thanos. It did take Disney some time, but it inevitably clicked that they indeed struck the gold mine with the Infinity Saga, and it's hilarious that you can easily pinpoint the millisecond when that realization struck. That Marvel was the guaranteed global billion-dollar phenomena that Star Wars failed to be for them, because suddenly Disney became suspiciously hands-on and started what I'd like to call Star Warsing Marvel. And they succeeded, but probably not in a way they probably wanted to. By that time, Bob Iger had a new shiny toy to play with. That was Disney+, so why not exploit the highly successful, hyped franchise as much as possible, as fast as possible? What could go wrong, right? Marvel obviously can't, right? Look at how much money the stupid Captain Marvel movie made, right? It's unthinkable how Disney managed to tank what seemed like an invincible reputation and loyalty of a franchise in span of just few months. That shit should be studied in business schools. I think Chapek? Anyway, Mr. Schmuck right here gets a lot of blame for MCU's Phase 4, since most of it, if not all of it, did air during his stay at the CEO headquarters, but I don't get it, cause most of it, if not all of it, was planned and announced in 2019. The biggest problem with modern Marvel is that Disney obviously digged their nails in and demanded quantity. There is no logical way to explain how a studio and a president was known for carefully and strategically planned projects would willingly turn into Kathleen Kennedy overnight, right after that same tactic brought them one of the biggest triumphs in film history. But it's not just Marvel. You can follow the timeline of every studio and IP that Disney owned from the beginning of Iger's reign to now, and you can definitely tell at what point any single one of them completely lost any creative autonomy and was eaten, digested, and shut out by Disney. For some it happened right away, for some it happened much later. It inevitably happened. So where does that leave us now? In 2020, Bob Iger's contract ran out and he had to step down as CEO, which was a hope-inducing prospect for me personally, since Infinity Saga was done, Skywalker Saga was gone, most live-action remakes were there, and it really felt like Disney could use a fresh chapter. Since Bob Iger has been proving himself to be a one-trick pony, financially, he had all the right instincts to create a huge monopoly where Disney owned everything everywhere all at once. But once he reached that peak where there was nothing more to buy, it became really obvious that this man is anything but creative. And Disney only recently has started facing the financial consequences, but better late than never, I guess. That's why I think the change of CEO could do wonders for the company. That was something that Bob Iger himself once represented in 2005. Someone who set the company on a much-needed, different path that somewhat worked until the path inevitably ran out, because it was the wrong one, Bob. Bob Chapek, Bob the sequel, the guy who ran Disney from 2020 to 2022, was far from a savior of Disney. He was not great. He was just there for 2 years. But of course, when Disney started plummeting financially, most people and the company itself started blaming this 2-year-old CEO who barely had a time to order himself a coffee, rather than, a man who ran the company into the ground by 15 years of buying Barbies only to behead them like 5 minutes later. But truly most of the complaints Bob 2.0 received was the belated result of Iger's greedy ass just milking his properties away. Those same properties that were running out of milk by the time Bob II stepped into the office and had to face the repercussions for crimes he did not commit. And this billionaire company did not know better than not to call the same man who causes chaos to begin with to fix it. In 2022, Iger was back as CEO, which was like, okay. I held on to a hope that after such a drought, Iger would come back with a fresh start, and for the first time in 20 years, actually change something? Anything? But no, the set of new announcements over the last few months are the same old unoriginal shit, but somehow even worse. So we've already learned that Disney would acquire a studio, keep up with the facade, keep the audiences engaged by feeding them the crumbs left over from the time the actual creative forces stood at the helm of those studios, until the facade and good reputation inevitably broke. They ran out of leftovers, people's sympathy, and had to start beating the dead fish. And oh boy, beat the fish they did. More live-action remakes, but this time the ones they pulled out of their ass more of Rey in Star Wars films because #girlboss, because it's still 2018 in Disney years, and new shiny set of Avengers, and more, don't you worry. Yay! So the same man who had a strategy to recycle every IP he owned came in and came up with a new strategy, which was to recycle his own last strategy. Oh, Bob. Okay, to figure out the future of Disney, I'm gonna go way back to Michael Eisner.
Excuse me, will you sit down, please? You're blocking our view.
Sorry, Mr. Eisner. Excuse me.
The guy who once was thought of as a revolutionary innovator who revived Disney. And the guy who is known for nearly destroying Disney by ruining the brand's reputation by cheapening it by terrible cash grab sequels. Reminds you of someone? As much as Bobby himself would hate to hear it, he is the new Eisner in my opinion, debatably even worse. As I mentioned before, Iger was perceived as the guy who succeeded Eisner in every way possible. For years, there was a legend of invincible Bob Iger who did the unthinkable. It really felt like this man found the ultimate cheat code. He found the perfect formula for making billion-dollar projects without a miss using the right balance of nostalgia, Disney magic, and good marketing. But if something seems too good to be true, it probably is, and life is no GTA. So Bob was sitting on a ticking bomb that might as well go off in
3, 2, 1.
What makes Iger worse, in my opinion, is that differently from Eisner, for him, the stakes are a lot higher, because today Disney is not just a pawn, it is an entire monopoly board. By cheapening Disney brand, Eisner risked the reputation of the Disney animation studio and its legacy. Iger is risking most of Hollywood's market that he bought. And the worst part is that Iger almost completely succeeded at ruining the reputation of all of it. What Bobby Boy completely misunderstood was that his plan had an expiration date, because it was not just nostalgia that kept people buying tickets. It was the reputation. Reputation of Disney, reputation of Pixar, Marvel, Star Wars, you name it. Nostalgia is immortal. There's nothing that can break it. If a person feels nostalgic towards a property, there's no way to take away from that. However, how that person feels about the property, aka its reputation, is completely destructible. With enough time, enough disappointment, letdowns, and false promises, nostalgia might live on, the reputation won't. And that's what Disney completely overlooked, and that is 100% of the reason why it's suffering. Both Eisner and Iger are living proofs that the company's main foundation is its reputation, and there's no cheat code that will beat it. Reputation takes a long-ass time to break, and because of that, it's really easy to get overconfident and underestimate the audience's intelligence and free will, but they will catch up with you and your stupid plans. They have to make a choice and do it fast, because none of this is gonna work for them, because their reputation is good as gone. They are in need of CPR. Would it be in form of a new CEO or a plan or a franchise, anything with integrity and creativity.
We embarked on a significant transformation to restore creativity to the center of our company.
But that choice is nothing close to being made, and hasn't been made in years. And in this case, well, get ready for a new Rey movie that will make like 30 million at this point. You can say anything about Eisner, but at the beginning of that man's reign, Disney was at its peak of creative artistry. His legacy shaped and reshaped Disney, not just as a company, but as a source of ultimate artistry. The thing is, Iger has no legacy to speak of. Behind him is only a company, a monopoly, a property, but not the art itself. Bob is a financial risk taker, but not a creative risk taker. This is a man who feels free and confident about spending billions of dollars on a studio, but cannot risk sparing an ounce of creative liberty. But don't get me wrong, I'm not here to say that, oh, how dare Bob Iger not care about the art and the soul and the beauty of life. No, not only it's unproductive, but it's fucking stupid to demand that from a businessman. As Eisner himself has said, they don't give a shit about creating art. They are here for the money. Exactly because of that, I would be lying if I said that Disney's current box office results do not bring me joy. You know what's worse than seeing one of the most powerful and versatile companies completely destroy one of your favorite franchises? Is to see them get away with it. No, actually get billions of dollars out of it. And I'm more than happy to see Disney in this financial state because money is the only language people like Robert Iger understand. Not only is this giving me hope for the future, it's also healing my hope in humanity. Because if I ever saw people support a film like The Lion King 2019 one more time, I would fuck.
If you study great brands over time and you try to figure out why do some companies stand the test of time and remain relevant, you would quickly conclude that most companies that go away, that fade away because they've abandoned the core values that created the company and the values in the first place. In the interest of staying relevant, they distance themselves from the very essence of what they were when they began. There is a way to completely adhere to those same values, provided they're the right values, but to present them to the world, to your customers, even to your employees, in much more relevant ways.